Buying a home can be stressful, but guess what? It doesn't have to be. And one of the ways in which you can ensure that is to make sure that you pick the right realtor. Making sure that you pick a realtor that you mesh with, that you feel like listens to you, that you feel like has good expertise in the city or cities in which you're living in. Make sure that they have a lot of good experience and are someone that's really going to advocate with you. It's really a lot of teamwork that goes on in doing that. And the better relationship that you have with your realtor, the better chances you are at having success and finding your home a lot quicker. And so one of the things that I do with my buyers, first off, is I have a buyer consultation. And that involves having a conversation with my buyer to see what situation is going on. What's their motivation in moving? Are they renting? Do they need to sell a property to do that? The other thing is that what are the features that they're looking for in their next home, and what are some of the deal breakers? That's important because I'm going to be looking along with them, trying to find properties that are going to be exactly what they're looking for. And the more I know, the better off I can search for them. Now, one of the things that I do once I have that is I set them up on our multiple listing service, and I'll put down the data that they're looking for. I personally, every realtor does it different, but I personally, in the market that we're in right now, I like to set them up on an email system where as soon as a house hits the market that matches their criteria, in real time, they get an email notification of where that property is. Now, the first email that goes out obviously will tell you all of the properties that are available at that time because it's starting it from scratch. But then subsequently after that, it just comes as the homes come on the market. The reason why I like to do that is because I have a lot of buyers who will look on websites to try to find homes that they really like. And I think that that's fine. You can use whatever system that you want to. But what I find sometimes is I sense and find that my buyers will have frustration because when you're going to a website and they're not notifying you of what's hitting the market that's new, oftentimes you'll find that you're looking at the same house over and over, or they start to all mesh and you can't tell whether that's one you've looked at or not. So that's why I set up those emails, because I really want to save my buyers the frustration of having that and for them to know exactly on record, like what's come to them and what's new. Now, after that's done and they see a property that they like, they'll reach out to me and I'll schedule showings. Now that's pretty easy to do. But then what I do is I go and I research the properties that we're looking at just to make sure that those properties are hitting all of the criteria that the buyer said that they wanted. Now, sometimes I'll run into issues where they said, hey, it's really important to us to have a yard with a fence because we have a dog, and a house will pop up that on the list I sent them, and they'll want to see it. And I always clarify with them, hey, this doesn't have the yard that you said you wanted. Is that a deal breaker? Sometimes they might not have noticed it, and I can go ahead and remove that from the list before we go out. Or sometimes it's like, well, it's not really as much of a deal breaker as we thought. And so, sometimes that could be the house, and then we can just find ways around getting that fence in the future. The next thing that I do is I go through and I look at things like how many days on the market has it been. I'll call the realtor and find out if there's any issues, if it's been on the market and then fell off, or I'm sorry, not on the market, but if it's been active and then, went under contract and then came back. Are there issues with the inspections? Are there issues that the seller didn't know about before? I try to find all those issues out, because the more information that I know before we actually go to a showing, the more time that I'm going to save my buyers. And for me, that's key. So after I do that, I'll also go through and look at their disclosures, and I'll read and see what's the history of that home. And then I bring those items to the showing with me. So this is just an example of an MLS form. It prints out 2 pages, but really it's just one. But it gives all of the information that's showing up on MLS. So this really is, I like to make sure that, my buyers have this for every property, because it helps keep track of the ones that we saw, and is this a yes, is this a no, is this a maybe, okay? And so it goes over everything. Plus it's a quick reference just in case we have any questions. The next thing that I always bring, unless for some reason it's not online, which it should be in Oklahoma, I bring what's called the residential property disclosure. This is a 3 to 4 page document depending upon where they fill it out. This one's actually 4. It used to be 3, now it's 4. So it basically goes over everything from do the systems work, does the dishwasher work, does the heater work, la la la, all that. But then it also goes into things like how old is the roof, have there ever been any previous leaks, are there structural issues. Now I always go over this before the showing as well, and if I run into anything significant, usually it's structural, I'll make sure and let the buyers know, because see, they wouldn't know this. But just looking online, they wouldn't know that. And so I'll reach out to them and I'll say, hey, looked at the disclosures and I saw this. Is that a concern to you? The thing is that ultimately it's going to be up to the buyer. It's going to be up to you whether or not you choose to see that. But being that I'm an advocate for you, I want to make sure that you're aware of that, because it is hard to get away even for a couple of hours to go look at houses. And I want to make sure that we're best utilizing our time and that we're best utilizing your time. And so I cover that with them. But I always bring this to a showing, and this is the main reason why. When you decide that you find a house that you like, you're going to have to sign, in Oklahoma, you're going to have to sign that you've read the disclosures for that house. This is something that's filled out by the sellers, and they have to initial it and sign it and everything. When you put your offer in, the buyer also has to say that they have read all this and understand fully everything that's on here before going under contract. I don't want to take somebody out and show them a house only for them to fall in love with it, to then see that there's something on here that's a deal breaker. So I just think that it's important that every buyer has the max amount of information that they can have at that particular showing. I've just found in 8 years that really solves a lot of issues. And if there is a particular issue that we do have concerns about since we've seen the property, it really allows us to ask the proper questions before going under contract, so that we're not waiting until inspections to find everything out. So I do think that is helpful. And I always bring these to every showing. Now, lastly, I always print a copy. Well, I usually print 2 copies for every buyer that I go out, because most of the time people don't come alone. And so I bring out the paperwork for them to have. They get to take the disclosures home, and they get to take these home for every showing that we have. I usually give them a folder so they can keep it in their car. I find that that's helpful, because if we do have to see several properties, at some point they can all start running together. And so when you have a folder, you can just keep the ones that are a yes on one side, and then you can have, the ones that are a no, you can turn them over or just get rid of them. It's all in one place and they don't lose that. The other thing is that whenever I go to a showing, after the showing is done, I never book my showings for like 15 minutes a pop. To me, that just doesn't give people enough time. I want people to organically be able to experience what that house is like being inside. And so as we're walking around, I'm taking notes to the things that they liked or they didn't like, what concerns did they have. And then after the showing is over, I'll ask them, what did you love about the property? What did you hate about the property? Do we have any questions? And I clearly, this one's not written on, but if this were one that I had gone to a showing on, you would see notes written all over here, basically, that deal with this property. I just think it's the best way to keep track of everything, because everything is in the details, especially when you're a buyer, because there's so many details to keep track of, because you're looking at multiple houses that are all in varying degrees of condition. So I write that down. And then also knowing what I wrote down and what they like also helps me to give feedback, which I know a lot of agents don't really do a whole lot of that anymore. But I really believe that if you're going to displace a seller for any length of time, and you decide that you're not going to bring an offer on that property, what's helpful to them is to know why. Why is that? It helps them to gauge so they can get their house sold faster. It's just a respectful thing to do. So that's what I bring with me. So that's just something that I kind of do. I'll have another video that goes over next steps once you actually find the house, but this is actually just an example of what I do whenever we're going to look at homes. I'm Jody Simpson, and I sell homes in the Tulsa and Claremore area.